there everyone, it's Kelly Folsom here and welcome back to another Vital Art session. In today's lesson we are going to be discussing that problematic issue of mixing greens. So I have a setup that has a large variety of different greens and different saturation levels and different, cool greens to warm greens. So let's get started. Okay, everyone, welcome back. So today, as I mentioned, we are going to be discussing the problem of greens, mixing different types of green. So if you look at our reference image here, what we're going to be painting, and I think this is a great way to learn by setting up to really learn about a specific color and all of its variations. I would say set up something. I've looked through the house. I've found everything that I could that has greens on it. And so as you can see, there's a really wide variety of greens to choose from. So for example, the green apple is more of a yellow green. If you had to find a color, it might actually have a little more yellow in it, but if you had to pick one of these, it would belong to this family. Whereas, say the green on the book has a little more green to it, not as much yellow. And then of course we're going to have different values, like this is the color family yellow green with white added. So for example, the eucalyptus leaves might be yellow green with a lot of white added, so a tint of yellow green. And then for example, the vase, and you're not going to find every green possible on this color wheel, but it's a good place to start to kind of help you get your bearings. But the green of the vase might be in between, green and blue-green. Now, then we have greens that, kind of they're desaturated or warmer tones of green. So these are going to be greens that actually have a lot of warmth in them. For example, the little terracotta pot has a lot of warmth in it, and some of it may actually be over here, like a desaturated yellow. So you might make that green with like a burnt umber and yellow. It might not have any blue in it at all. And to the green yellow here. So anyway, so we're going to dive in and we're going to treat this like a poster study. We're not going to be developing so much form, but we're really just going to be looking to try to match the different temperatures and saturation levels of the greens in front of us, just to kind of train our eye and learn our colors better. So the only actual green color that I'm going to be using, tube green, is Phthalo Green Cool by Sennelier, and that's right here. And that color for that large vase, that is about, sometimes you have objects like that are a very unique color, and so in those cases you need a more specific tube color than what I usually use. Otherwise, what we'll be using to make our greens will be variation on Prussian blue, which is more turquoise, and Prussian can get you pretty close to this look, but just not quite the same. And then ultramarine blue for, more neutral or softer blues. Oh, and I forgot to mention on the cloth, we've got two background cloths. One that is more in the blue-green family, maybe in here. And then one that is more, a neutral. And again, this is where the color wheel won't quite help you all the way, but it's kind of neutralized like this, like a yellow-green, but lighter in value. So we have numerous, objects in the yellow-green and in the blue-green and typical green, but at different saturation levels and different values. I'm gonna get a darker one here. Okay, so to really get this show on the road, what I'm going to start with first is say the colors that I think are easiest. So when I was looking at the color wheel, the yellow-green apple was perhaps one of the easier ones for me to identify. And so I'm going to just start with a little, that Prussian is so strong, so just a little bit of Prussian with my Cad Lemon. Oh. Okay, and then I know we need a little bit of white in it. And the white's going to cool it off, so I would say back to the yellow again. You know, what I would do is kind of hold up the brush in front, squint my eyes and see if I feel like I'm kind of in the right ballpark. Oops, grabbed a little too much blue-green there. So, and this is a pretty pure color. It's really not, it is a tint because it has white in it, but it's also not, it's not desaturated at all. So it's a pretty high intensity color of the apple for the most part. So I'm just going to block that in. And I forgot to put in my shadow color on that. And then I also noticed, okay, towards the bottom of the apple, it actually gets a little more of that blue-green. So we'll add some of that in. Still close in value, but it does shift colors a little bit. Let me just real quickly, I just use burnt umber and blue for all of my shadow colors, just to start the painting, because I always feel like most of the color information is in the lights, not the shadow. So I just went ahead and blocked in all of my form shadow shapes and cast shadow shapes for now. All right, so we could jump directly down to this green on the book. And when I was looking at the color wheel earlier, it looked like this was just, you know, a little more green in it. You know, a little more green, not quite as yellow green. And you notice with this flat that you've got to use like a lot. It really picks up a lot of paint, which is great. And so it has a little more blue in it. Again, I kind of want to hold it over. A little bit of white. It's not a shadow. And you know, that looks pretty good actually. If you don't think your green's through, then the tendency is by the time you're done, maybe they all look the same. And we don't want that to happen. So, oh, and there's a piece of the book that follows through over here. So we could actually jump straight on down to the cloth color since we're nearby that. It's kind of maybe easier to relate these colors. And you can see how turquoise, kind of peacock blue or something that Prussian is. Just with white. It's a beautiful turquoisey color. And so I'm going to keep looking at my setup, but this is definitely more, you know, if we recall, this is definitely more kind of in a blue-green family. So, you know, very, and I would say more like here. So, again, I can hold it over. Okay, that looks pretty close. And so we want to lay in some of that beautiful color here. So I think this can be a really great way to practice your color mixing, is set up some practical exercises for yourself like this. And of course the bottom plane here can go darker if I'll just go ahead and put that in, and then I can add a little more, maybe a little brickier with the yellow ochre as it gets less light down here. And remember, just try to treat this as, in school we called these poster studies, where, you know, it's just basic flat shapes of color. Because the point of the exercise is really just to strengthen your understanding of how to mix greens. Sorry, just want to block some of that white rose in back there. All right, so moving on, let's next look at, since we have this leaf here, let's look at this leaf. Now this is one of those colors that is not quite such a pure green. And even this back leaf here is slightly different than the one in front. So it's lighter in value. So I'm going to add some white to this mixture. And, you know, that gives me a nice tint. But if I had to pick again, it would be, you know, in that yellow-green family, same as the apple, just not quite as intense. So in this case, I might actually start pulling in a little bit of yellow ochre. That is a weaker yellow and a little bit earthier yellow. I don't think we really need any red just yet to neutralize the green. So you're looking at the color family first. Which color family does it belong to? Green, yellow green, blue green. And really the green that's on the ceramic pitcher over here may not even be quite considered green family. It's more of a, if you really look at how you have to mix that color, it's more of like a neutralized yellow. So first figure out the color family, and then you want to figure out the saturation level. How pure of a color is it? Does it need to be kept dark but desaturated? Does it need to be lightened and it's a little bit desaturated? And I might just use a little more of that green from the apple to try to indicate the stem. Okay, so moving on through for now. Another, super easy color would of course be that beautiful green of the pot. So that's a very transparent color, the Phthalo Green Cool. So you do need some white in there. And you can see how it's slightly, more brilliant than, say, the Prussian. And I would say this is more of kind of a true kind of emerald green. I added a little too much white. Again, you can kind of hold that up. And we're not talking about, in this case, effects of light and shadow and all of that. We're just thinking about the color. All right, so and then as it goes down the form, might get a little bit more darker green down here. Okay. And then we also have some of that color on the inside opening. We just fill this in. Okay, so, and then I'm just going to maybe take some of that green with some black and maybe even some alizarin to really take this cast shadow darker here than that original sketching color. So that way we can start to get into the other greens. So, and of course you could make, you know, color charts with all the different greens. Really explore those. As I mentioned, most of the time I feel like I don't need anything besides black, ultramarine, and Prussian. So, okay, let's look at that background color. If we remember, you know, looking earlier on, you know, my feeling is it's a desaturated yellow-green again, you know, lots of yellow in that color. So it's desaturated, but it's lighter in value than this. So let's see if we can get something going in that ballpark. I think since it is so desaturated, I'll start the color with black. Oops. And we know that it is lighter, so once I kind of get that color, then I can use some of my white to neutralize. It may be a mix of yellow ochre and cadmium lemon. That's looking better. And that's kind of one of those fabrics that has a little bit of a sheen, like a two-tone. So I would say pick one and go with it. You know, one of the tones looks a little grayer, one looks a little brighter and lighter. So maybe pick one and go with it. So I feel like that still needs to be a little more neutralized. And of course you can always use like an umber, raw umber, and a little touch of red. Any of those will work to cut the green. So we'll just put in a little touch of the burnt umber, because I think even just with the black it's still like a little too intense. It still looks to me to be too close to that. So you can see how a little bit of that burnt umber looks slightly different than over here, and we might do a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's almost like a beige green. So we'll just get that filled in for now. I would say probably a little bit darker and more neutral, closer to the shadow. So a little bit more black and a little bit more of the color mixes. All the colors that we used. Black, burnt umber, and the two yellows. Less of the white. So kind of like a muddier olive green. And in that case, the secret is always in the red family. Oops. If it's more of an earthy color, then I would say use an earth warm color like burnt umber or even transparent red oxide. It's like a cooler neutral gray, you might use alizarin crimson to neutralize. So I kind of added this at the last minute, but this green leaf mostly because I thought, although it's quite similar to the book, but I thought it might give us a little bit different color. Oops. Whoopsie. That had some paint on it. It's one thing about that phthalo. It has some staining power now. All right. So, and for the shadows, you know, as I said, I'm not going to think about it too much as it being green, but it definitely can have a greenish tint. But when I really look at it, it just doesn't really have a sense of color. So I definitely want something that has a little more, you know, coverage than what I had down. So maybe some ultramarine, cad orange, cad yellow deep, sorry. Pretty much cad, oopsie. You can see when you're painting fast, you kind of pick stuff up. Okay. Okay, so now looking at that little, it's like a little Mexican clay pitcher. And, you know, when I look at that color, it's really got a lot of desaturated orange yellow or just yellow. Maybe some of this and some of the purer parts that have more green. But I think it's that underneath terracotta color that's sort of influencing the color on top. So it's making it more of a warmer color. So we know it's kind of more in this maybe desaturated yellow orange. So we want to go for that first. Use some black and mix these two yellows together. Let's see, a little more black. And then we know that at least in the light part, it does have to have some white in there to raise the value a little bit. And it's looking pretty good. So again, I try to hold it over the actual object. And I'll say too, in nature, a lot of the greens, you know, are more like this, very neutralized greens, you know, painting landscape. You're going to find a lot of these types of greens, very neutral tones. So then I would say in the darker portion, maybe that's where we see more of the green, a little bit closer to the green, and it is darker in value since this is a plane that's kind of getting less light here. So I'll add in some of the ultramarine. And if it's feeling too green, I'm going to add a pinch of red oxide, which I feel like it needs. And maybe a little bit of that down here too. There's like this little stripe that's similar to that color. Okay, back to, let's get kind of a better shadow here that has a little more coverage here on this side. You can see how the flats or the brights are really great at laying down really thick passages of paint and also broader shapes. So if you're really looking to cover some ground quickly and get a layer of paint down quickly, then I would say these are definitely the way to go. Generally, unless I'm maybe plein air painting or doing something like this, you know, I'm allowed to, you know, maybe move a little bit slower and kind of build up. So just two different looks. And of course we do have one color in here that's like not green, so this orange, so we'll do some cad yellow deep. And just as orange and red is a secret to neutralizing green, vice versa, you know, so if you are mixing a color but it's a neutral, more neutral red, then you can of course use anything that has a little bit of green in it to neutralize the color. Okay, so pretty much the last thing that we have left, oh, I see I forgot to put in a little peekaboo of space here, is that eucalyptus. And that is a really clean, well, there's a few things here, so but hopefully this will give you enough to where you can think through your greens better. So first I want to identify, remember on the eucalyptus, I want to identify, you know, it's pretty much a true green or yellow green that has a lot of white in it. And when I look, some of them have more green in it, like the shadow sides, and then some of them are getting more light. So I might pick more of this color for some of the ones that are more washed out. But you just want to pick something to start with, and of course usually you don't want all of them to be the same. So all right, so let's do a lot of, we know there's a lot of white, and in painting, or I don't know if it's in design too, but they would call that a tint. And then we'll grab a little bit of this. Oh, too much. Gotta keep in mind that that phthalo is so strong. And so mostly, yeah, I want it to be kind of mintier than the yellow-green apple. So I might kind of hold it over, like make sure that it looks slightly different than this color or this color. Otherwise, you know, you're gonna wind up with, again, everything being kind of in the same color family. And then some of them are a little bit darker. Might use a little pinch of that ochre again. Darker, not the same. Isn't it funny how that happens? Sometimes you think you've mixed a different color, and then you realize, oops, nope, same, too much the same. All right, and then of course for the eucalyptus shadow, you might use Prussian. You know, a little, maybe it's a little bit lighter, not quite as dark. We can kind of paint into that. Just seeing that there's a little rim here with more of that terracotta color showing through. And then we have a very gray, kind of a grayish green here for the stem. So it almost isn't green at all. So maybe I'll just mix all of this together, kind of hold that up. It looks pretty close to what I need there for just that kind of neutral, maybe a little bit lighter. On this side, so a little more white, a little more yellow. That probably just depends how dried out the stem is. Then over here again we get a pretty high intensity yellow-green. Oops. For that leaf on the rose that's standing out there. And then for this green rose leaf, you know, it's kind of more of a true green. So I'm going to do some Prussian. Any of my more intense greens I'll usually use Prussian for. And then my softer, more muted greens, I will generally use ultramarine or black, one of the two. It's a little more yellow. So there might be a lighter side and a darker side to this leaf. And then we do have a very dark, rich one back here. So going back to that Prussian mixture. And then, you know, there's just a rim, a little edge of light if I can get it. It might be better to do this with a palette knife, but on the edge of the leaf there.